And so the World First 30 has been timed, and it was an Atal'Dazar by the team of Yoda, Greg, Onesie, Caitlin, and Psycho. And it was the first. I mean, there's been a couple since then. There's been some Blackrock Holds, but mostly Atal'Dazars for the 30 level. And we're going to take a look at Atal'Dazar and kind of break down this run and kind of talk through what they're doing in this run that's kind of interesting, what you can do in this run that's interesting, and what's kind of going on here. And so what we're going to see right off the bat, actually, we're going to pause for a second and look at their route. So they're going to be going to Rison first. And so there are a couple of different decisions as to what route you can actually be making in this run. First off, you could go left. I think that going left on Fortified and utilizing your Lust on Fortified makes a lot of sense. But it doesn't make a lot of sense on Fortified Bolstering. And so the reason it doesn't make sense on Fortified Bolstering is because you actually can't turn the 6-pack into a 9-pack, which, you know, a 9 or a 10-pull pack here makes sense. You could actually even maybe break it down to like an 8-pull if you only bring the 2 and you don't bring this extra Confessor in. If you have Bloodlust for it, and this is especially true, you can go left side and you can lust this pack, and it makes sense. Now, for this pull to be their first pull of the dungeon, it makes sense on tyrannical situations or situations in which you can't merge these pulls together on Fortified. And so that makes sense for them to be doing it the way that they're doing it currently. And so that's what they're going to be doing. We've also actually seen some groups have their healers start the key as a DPS and they go into Rison. And this is typically done with like a prop paladin who can bop off the bleed on themselves. They can also keep themselves alive in a weird way. And groups that also have an augmentation evoker on top of that. And so you'll start the key with 4 DPS. You'll jam your Lust into this. Now, this group is not necessarily doing it, but it's something that we have seen from some of the groups. Now, this team, they just burn all of their offensive CDs. They take the Raptors into Rison, and it makes a lot of sense. And so they're kind of setting up for their second Lust of the Dungeon. Second Lust of the Dungeon is typically that pack in front of Priestess Alunza with this route. And so let's talk about Colossus routing, because a lot of pugs love to go right. I think that going right is horrible. Left is certainly the superior route. Left is even the superior route on Fortified. And so, actually, let me back up a little bit as to when they start this pull. So first and foremost, they have all of their offensive CDs available for this pack. This is very good for them. They're going to be pressing meta and all. Actually, they don't even have meta, but they have Icy Veins and they have Eons and stuff like that available for this pull. And now what you can see on screen here is the Juggernauts are baited by targets at ranged. And this is to there's a distinction to be made of ranged targets. These are targets at ranged. And so what you can see right here is they're dropping things like they've dropped mirror images. They have the trees. They have, you know, they have the trees down. They also have the water Ellie out at range. And that's going to be baiting the Juggernauts. They've also left their healer out at range to run around to make sure that the Juggernauts have an eligible target, because sometimes the mirror images or the trees or the water Ellie won't be in combat in a correct way. But that's just something that you can note. You can also utilize things such as, you know, like DK can MC a mob and leave it at range and that kind of thing. But you can also put like Fell Hunter at range as well. But that's something that this group will be doing, is they're making sure to not get hit by any of the Juggernaut charges, because at this level, you're going to die 100 to 0. And so that's something that you have to watch out for. Now let's talk about the Colossus, because the Colossus is not a mob that is typically pulled by a lot of groups, but it is a route, and this is a pack and like some mobs that I would say that many pugs should adapt and adopt, because Colossus gives good count. Now Colossus has 2 casts. It's Soul Burn. Okay, there's 1 cast. The one cast is Soul Burn, but the second mechanic that it does is whenever mobs around it die, it gains stacks. And these stacks work similar to bolstering, but it's also multiplicative with bolstering, where the mob gets bigger and it does more damage to your group. Or it does more damage on the Soul Burn cast. Now, Soul Burn is meldable, it's invisible, it's feign deathable, that kind of thing. And so you should be using that pretty much as often as you can on this Colossus. But on top of that, the buff that it gets from killing any of the trolls around it is purgeable. And so if you have, like, you know, Spell Steal, if you have Demon Hunter Purge, you can remove that buff, and it's not too big of a deal. Now, you can take these packs slow as well. As you do see this group from Yoda, they're making sure to take this pack slow. And something that I probably could have talked about in the last poll, but didn't, are the Confessors. So how this group is dealing with Confessors is they're having Psycho on their Havoc Demon Hunter solo this Confessor. And so this is because the Bonsomni's Mantle and the Healing Word doesn't recast on CC. And so you're going to see Psycho cycling things such as Fell Eruption, Chaos Nova, Metamorphosis stun potentially, and then cage and kick to be able to make sure that the Confessor cast is never going off. Then you're going to have the remainder of your kicks be cycled into the Augur, making sure that none of the wildfires go off because the dot's pretty dangerous, and making sure that the AoE doesn't go off on the Augur. And so that's like the first part of the dungeon. A lot of the rest of the dungeon's like fairly standard. This is their second lust pull, and you know, it makes a lot of sense. They lusted a little bit late, but it's not like the end of the world that you do see that they're lusting it. They still have their druid healer playing out at range, and they're through the hard part of the key. Once they're able to get this trash pack killed off on Priestess Alunza, the rest of this dungeon is going to be fairly normal. They leave this Augur CC'd because they don't want to play double Augur into that trash pack that's in front of Priestess Alunza, and so they're going to be taking this Augur into the boss because they know they can just throw shields at it permanently and deal with it that way. From here on out, I would say fairly standard run. The last thing I think that we should necessarily look at is Yazma, because Yasma is always very, very challenging, especially at like a high-end key, like on a 30. They walk into this key, and they have about 5 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. They have Lust available, so this will be their third Lust of the dungeon. Their second Lust was at like the 10:30 mark on that Priestess Trash that we just looked at. And so what they're doing right here is they need to make sure that they're dropping the Soul Rend mobs in a good spot, and on top of that, they're making sure that people aren't going to be getting one shot by Racking Pain. This is by utilizing things such as externals right here. You see Big Berto gets Iron Barked because Big Berto knows that he's going to be rotating rescue shields on every other Soul Rend, and he's going to be scalesing the other ones. And so whenever he gets, especially if he gets a bunch of Racking Pains in a row, he's going to run out of scales charges, or he's going to run out of defensives. You're also able to lob Zephyr kind of whenever you want to. But externals from this group are actually very, very, very powerful. And Psycho here, he gets the Racking Pain on him, but he's also got Blur available. And he knows that he's not going to get one-shot 100 to 0 by the Soul Rend, or potentially they're going to be looking to Zephyr the Soul Rend to make sure Psycho doesn't die. And so you see Big Berto puts the rescue shield onto somebody. Psycho is able to live this without getting 100 to 0. That's not going to be apparent for the rest of the group. But they're also making sure to move the boss well. And what I say whenever move the boss well, I've released a video specifically talking about this boss, but they're moving the boss around like the outside ring. You see Yoda's moving it, and then they're going to be dropping the Soul Rends stacked up in a group and killing those off as they move. And then the rest of the group is going to be walking with the boss. They're not going to be playing out in the middle of the world. They're not going to be doing their own thing. They're going to be stacked up on the boss and moving as a group. And this allows them to get the spiders, the Echoes of Shadra, spawned in a way that's on top of the boss. But then whenever they do big moves, this is going to allow them to bait the spiders onto one side of the room and then bait the spiders on the other side of the room. And then just rinse and repeat. And you're just going to be baiting them back and forth, and they're going to move across the room because they move more whenever they're in this active phase here. But overall, that's basically what we saw out of the 30 Atal'Dazar. I'm not really surprised that it's an Atal'Dazar. This is the key with the most lenient timer. I think that this group performed really well. They've been doing a lot of high-end keys across the whole entire season. You should definitely go check them out and check out the YouTube video down in the description as well. And I'll see you guys in the next video.